guys, so welcome aboard again for part 2 of the mundane to the magnificent, where we're finishing up the book that we read from last time.
That's right. Memories and Reflections, Vera Stanley Alder. Pick it up.
It's awesome. Okay, so this, I think, what was the page that we started from? Like 100 basically or something, but
yeah, so we started with chapter 9.
Chapter 9, okay. And so she goes to a lunatic asylum is what happens this time. And he basically, the idea was, so Raphael decides to, who is the etheric man or whatever, he decides to come and take her to see, the etheric and astral workings of a healthy individual and then unhealthy individual, so that you could see kind of what imbalances look like in the body. So the first thing they do is they go and they examine this nurse, and she gets to see her heart chakra, which is her sun of her solar system, and that it's very healthy, and that there's a being inside of it that is working and has other little beings working for it. Basically, all your capillaries and all the workings of the machine that is your heart or whatever don't just run automatically. Nothing runs automatically. Everything has a system of, something has a job that's doing it, right?
Yes, there's a conscious thought behind it.
Right. There's consciousness in everything, essentially.
Conscious, yeah.
Which I like that idea. It's so cool. And then it basically takes her up on through to the head, and she kind of gets to see what kind of a healthy functioning brain looks like, or whatever. I don't know if you would call that third eye chakra, or she doesn't really name the chakras or even say the word chakra, but I wrote this down. Yeah, she just say the lotus and the head thing, and she also mentioned something about she said she sees the solar systems in her chakras near her heart, her brain, her throat, her solar plexus. And I'm kind of isn't solar plexus a name for a chakra? Is there other cultures that use that term? I don't even know. But anyway, so yeah, she doesn't use the word. Also, you have to realize this really was written in 1979, but about her experience in 1939. Is that
well? That's when it was published. It was published in 1979. So I don't know when it was written, because it could have. She indicates that it was her thought, her memories and reflections, but we don't know how long after it is. It doesn't indicate that, or at least I didn't get that.
Well, it's definitely supposedly written as if it's from the knowledge of the person who's from 1939.
Right.
So, so who knows how popular her understand. Oh, by the way, I was researching her. Her cousin is Niels Bohr, or he's the contemporary of Einstein. He was the guy who invented quantum mechanics.
Wow.
So she comes from an intelligent family, A, and B, she obviously had discussions of cellular, of tiny, she knew what composed the world. He was a big I think he may have been responsible for the double split experiment, because he's in that book that I'm reading about the holographic universe. He's a big guy of that. And then he's also was pretty big in just discovering what's in an atom.
Well, I would have to wonder if any of this overlaps with the whole interview with an alien, because and the lost individuals that came and that are now being found, or based on that, you would have to go and watch or talk, either listen to interview with an alien, or listen to our talks about it to get the fuller picture.
Oh, are you talking about how when she goes into the dream state, there's the council of people who are
not just that, but I mean that if she's so knowledgeable in this, it makes me wonder if she was one of the individuals who the domain is looking for. One of the lost 3,000 members, and maybe her cousin, because all these people are very high up there, which is interesting, because this book, the way this was written, this would have been written before in every sense. It would have been 10 years before that book.
and then even if its first publication was in the 70s, like the alien with the interview, that one wasn't written until the early 2000s. So
Right. Yeah.
this would precede it. But I did like how yeah, she even does talk like the hierarchy, like.
Yes, the hierarchy. That was
So we'll
interesting.
go into that in a second. But then, okay, so back to the chakras real quick in the insane asylum. So she's in the nurse's healthy functioningness, and then for example, he's kind of going like, okay, well, now we got to show you what happens. Well, and so she's finding that there's these major chakras. There's 7 major, like, what do you call them, like, she kind of deferred to, like, she calls devas as like these things that help control the earth, but they're basically like they're subsystems in your body that are other planets that are help govern your main organs and your main functioning of your body. So
Right.
then he goes and to show her an unhealthy person. So the first one he goes to is like this alcoholic, and he shows that like the for the physical death there. Okay, basically, oh, these are elementals that each center has its own overlord, and all of these have workers and for the other organs that have intelligent workings around them. Anyway, so like he goes into alcoholic, and it shows that the one that's in charge of its like thirst, like, which I would assume is maybe your solar plex or something, is a swollen, thirsty elemental that's dominated all the others, and it
Yeah.
controls the will of like your mastermind. Is so basically that elemental then
Took
became the
over.
source of the body, and
Yes.
it's wanting it's all of its needs.
Yeah, that makes sense with addictions, you know, that,
Yeah, it really
yeah,
does. And it's kind of
yeah,
interesting because a lot of people, when they talk about addictions, it's like they don't have control.
yeah, exactly. Right. And alcohol has been called, and not to get into this whole big thing about analyzing alcohol, but alcohol has been called the spirits, and that
Oh yeah,
people, you
interesting.
know, and that it's like the escape of the spirit because of its effects on people. But anyway, so that was a person with an addiction. Yeah. And there was
Yeah,
the other person with the who lost his wife, and he was just in self-pity and misery.
right. That was the next one she went to, was like he basically put all of his love. At one point he was healthy and he put all of his love into one person, which was his wife. She died, and then he ended up getting like his heart like stopped, like just died with him, and he stopped like feeding all of his other chakras. And then it said that this is he's building a cancer. He's becoming a
Yes,
cancer patient.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
it says
and
that cancer is misplaced energy.
right. Yes, that was big. What were the, it wasn't just self-pity, but what were the other two causes of that? Do you have that in front of you?
Um, melancholy. He put all of his,
Melancholy, yes.
yeah, melancholy put all of his love into his wife, and then she died, and then cancer was misplaced. But it also says that elementals vices can manifest into our own indulgences. So you have to use your will. If you don't use your will, you can spoil your
Right,
your little elementals, and then they could take advantage of you. So
right, yeah,
that's what disease is, basically, is what he was trying to show her. And then I don't know, I did have this one thing that I said to read about cancer. It was on 110. So it says, okay, like this is when he's looking at the dude who lost his wife who's getting cancer. He says, "You're looking at cancer," said Raphael gravely. "Brooding and resentment are very often the cause of the malignant growth. When you look
yes.
at this man, you can understand how it happens. It's always a case of misplaced energy, so please consider that very carefully. That which we call love is really a radiation which flows to us from the center of the sun. It should link us with all living creatures on earth and an exchange of understanding and cooperation. We human beings have made a travesty of the part we are meant to play in respect to the mighty sun
Mhm.
force. That result is disease, both mental and physical." So anyway, he goes on. So like that is kind of an interesting takeaway from that, where you're kind
Yes,
of like, okay.
right. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot to think about because it's just something practical. And then it's like kind of just keeping in check your own self and realizing how emotions can cause disease, which is disease.
Yeah. And so then, like, I also thought this was an interesting little note, how the nurse comes back by when, you know, they're by the diseased patients, and she touches some flowers, and she's able to etherically see that the flowers kind of like perk up and are like, woo, and just temporarily they are fed from the nurse's energy. And she said, like, oh, that's what they would call like green fingers. Like, and it was like she was spreading love energy, or that's what you call like a green thumb. But it was basically saying that, like, you have to maintain that within yourself. Like, somebody else can't
Yes.
give it to you forever.
Right, because when she would come in the room, they would all light up and their demeanor would change and they would be okay around her because she had so much love.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as she left, they weren't able to maintain that. But the other thing was, I was under the impression that she didn't realize that she was doing that, so it was unintentional. And so it was like it was just her natural state of being, but because it wasn't intentional, it only went so far as to her like radius of when she was actually present.
Well,
rather
I
than
mean,
her
you know,
intention.
there's people in real life who, like, certain people just could not be mean to, or I mean, like, people you act differently around certain people than you do others. You know, it's just,
Right. Yeah, they have like an energy, you know. Yeah.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
people you just don't mess with.
Right. Yes, that's true.
And so anyway, after this, he again hints to her that the planet's alive and has a consciousness, and it's got its own destiny to accomplish. So it is its own entity, and that there's elementals, like there are elemental centers within the own Earth. So then their next sort of function, or their next sort of meeting is she wants to go in and see like how the Earth itself functions, and then what we are in relation to the Earth. So this part I liked quite a bit.
Yeah, when she went down, down, down. One of the things that stood out for me was how she was like, what? Well, all right, you set it up, and I want to talk about the pear
so
tree.
So she goes on to talk about how he takes her in through the crust, and he takes her through the different elements of the earth, and she kind of starts to see that the soil of the planet is just only skin deep, just like how our skin is on our cell, on our being. And then he takes her like to like the lava, like the liquids, all this stuff. And she's kind of going, okay, well, like where's the brain of the planet? Like what's the brain? And he's like, well, humans are the planetary mind cells. So individuals thinking, well, and so like that's what he was kind of like, even within your own brain, like you have brain cells, you have other little things like little neurons like sending you signals, but it's not just one entity, one being. It's a giant machine. It's a giant receiving machine. And so she was like, well, where would that exist on Earth? And he's like, well, what is a collective group of a bunch of individual thinking things that exist on the planet? She's like, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is people. And he's like, well, why can't it be people? It's people. And so then she kind of starts going like, oh, whoa. So like that's the importance of a human being. Like you are a brain cell of planet Earth. And then I thought that was good. So okay, humans are planetary mind cells, individual thinking cells. Our bad emotions and thoughts form poison to the planet and like natural disasters and that kind of stuff. And our good deeds help with the plan, which is to speed up progress, which we'll learn about what the plan is a little bit later. And that there's 4 kingdoms. He talks about there's the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the spiritual kingdom, and that all of them rely on basically our collective thought patterns.
Right. Yeah. Well, that it does make sense, and that's kind of been consistent throughout the teachings about above and below, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's part of me sometimes goes like, yeah, it's a little self-important of humans in some way, because I'm like, well, but
about us being the mind of planet Earth.
Yeah, a little bit. Like I get it, I see it, but I don't understand like how we're these unconscious things that aren't really that. I mean, we're barely conscious, I would say, as a collective. And we aren't very like I don't know, we're not very good stewards of the planet that we're living on. And so like
Right.
I don't know, I just think of like, if there's like this giant, even if there's solar systems within our cells, there's got to be solar systems within animal cells that are their own universes and stuff. So so yeah, basically I'm just not saying it's not a thing, but it is kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how
Well,
much.
yeah, I was thinking how Mother Earth is so like I always think of her as she is the one who not controls us, but she's really in charge of everything. You know, we live here on Earth and we're the planet. We need her in order to survive. But and so in that sense, I didn't really think like that we could be the brains, but I kind of get that too, because I don't think, even though I see what you're saying, that we're just at like minimal mass consciousness, I think that's part of the point. Once we get into full consciousness,
Well,
then
but I also kind of feel like if she shook us off her back today,
right.
like she did the dinosaurs or whatever, or something did, whatever, I think she'd be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's true. That is true. I thought the same. Like she's still going to exist, right?
Right.
So
Whereas if our brain cells were just fried to hell, we would not be fine.
right, as humans, but we would still exist. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I also kind of thought about that too for a while, about like what is this brain function that we have on Mother Earth? But I do think that that's part of it. If we were all
Well, but it does make me kind of be more like, oh man, if we are the brain cells of the planet, we need to step it up.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, we think that we are. People really think that we are. I can see that
Yeah.
you're saying that we don't think that, but we think that we're at the top of the chain, and we think that all these other beings may not have as much consciousness or certain amount of consciousness or intelligence. And we definitely think pretty highly of ourselves as a collective.
Yeah,
So yeah,
there is that.
yeah, there is that ego.
Well, that's true. Okay. This part I'm a rock person, so I like this part a lot. But it was like
The
so
minerals.
she's like going in to the crust, or like into the actual detailed soil etherically within the planet, and she sees like, you know, like this like super spark. She's seeing like rays of everything. And it was she sees a diamond, and then basically he was talking about how like it's positive and negative energy, and it's the polarity of cosmic rays, and they're meeting and it's crystallizing. So like that's what all these awesome kind of like specialized rocks that we like are attracted to are. They're, and so for me that sort of just made me think like, okay, so like they're balanced cosmic energy.
Well,
That's
that's yeah,
what caused them to be formed.
right.
Maybe
Hmm,
that's our attraction to them.
maybe. Yeah, it didn't go a lot into the mineral kingdom. There was I felt like, you know, which four kingdoms? Just, oh, there's the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the spiritual kingdom. And mankind's struggles and activities bring each of these kingdoms contact with mind, and thus stimulation to progress. But yeah, the mineral kingdom wasn't really taught. It wasn't like there was a lot said about it. So what did you feel?
Well, I thought this was interesting because, like, well, she goes, this is kind of how I was thinking. On the top of 127, she says, at this point, explained Raphael, reading my thoughts, the Earth's gravitation or the magnetism reacts in its maximum strength. If it were not so, the crust of the Earth would fly off into space into a vast explosion, and all would be disintegrated. The pull from the Earth's core draws the roots downward and make them grow downwards, and the pull from the sun's gravitation or
Yes.
magnetism pulls the plants out of the earth and makes it grow upwards. And the pull from the moon's magnetism causes the horizontal growth of plants and movements of tides of all kinds. The rays from all the other planets cause crystallization into different shapes. In certain shapes, and certain shaped atoms crystallize into different molecules, and these form larger crystals in accordance with their kind. Everything is built upon crystal formation, which itself is produced through intersecting lines of force or rays from stellar bodies, some of them vast distances from our solar system.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so like that's where I was kind of going, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then she's like, oh, is that astrology and all that stuff? And he's,
Yes. Yeah, I liked that about this. Astrology is the greatest of all sciences. Yeah, I see what you're saying now. The crystalline, and that's coming up again now with a lot of the crystalline structures and the DNA. You have your regular DNA structure and then the crystalline structures. So a lot of, I feel like this is now, I guess, with the age of Aquarius or the new age that's happening right now. A lot of this is repeated, or you can see it coming out in different forms. So yeah, that makes sense with the crystalline
okay.
structures.
So that, I mean, it is interesting how, I mean, I know geologically how they explain all these things are formed, but yeah, I don't know. It is interesting, like where things are actually found in mind and all that stuff. So it could be different points of cosmic emergent rays going into one point, and then like, oh, okay, that's like what made the magma melt in that certain way or collect those certain properties. I don't know. I just thought that was pretty cool for me.
Yeah.
Oh, and then well, she goes into about how thin the soil is and how it's like human skin when you look at it as a collective whole, and that artificial fertilizer is killing the soil, because she saw some like
Yeah, that was
area.
the thing that stood out for me.
Yeah, I thought that was like, I was going like, oh. And actually what kind of made me think about that is just recently I've sort of started like, I'm just using like this for moisturizer at night, just like shit. It's just like African shea butter. It's like no other ingredient. I'm sort of trying to like get away from multiple ingredients, so I'm trying to go back to like bait, like for as many things as I can, like on, because it's your biggest organ. And I'm such a product whore. Like I always have, like, I don't know, I always put all this, and I'm just like looking at the back of my lotion bottle, and it's got like all these chemical stuff. I don't even know what it is, and I'm going like, maybe I should start being a little more base level natural with the stuff I'm putting on my skin. But that's kind of like the fertilizer thing, almost, if you think about it.
Right. So this area that she came to was just seemingly dead or no activity, and there wasn't much happening there. And then Raphael said to her, those are actually the roots of or the area of below your pear trees. And with the fertilizer, it caused a false stimulation.
Yeah, your artificial fertilizers.
Right, which I was thinking of kind of like compared to as coffee, like a stimulation, like, oh, okay, but it wasn't your real energy. But then the overproduction of it would seep down into the soil, and it would poison it. So basically, we're eating poisons in that sense. And I was wondering if those were synthetic fertilizers that were put over there. I was trying to.
Yeah, I don't know, like what they would have been using back then. But
right. Yeah, I don't know. And so many people in the town were dying of cancer and had all these illnesses, which was one of her biggest reasons, or wanting her desires to know more about why all these people were suffering, and why people were suffering, and why wars happen and all this. But I thought, I wonder if these cancers that were happening just around her and all these illnesses were caused by, like, what exactly, what was happening. I'm curious. I know this imbalance, but I just was like, was it connected at all to those fertilizers?
I mean, I know, I can remember when I was living in London, they had this like statue in the center of Trafalgar Square that didn't, like, it was like a woman without arms and legs, and it was like there was a big disease going on during World War II, and it was from some kind of like bad polio vaccination that had all this stuff that mutated all these babies that were born with them.
Yes.
I mean, so like they had a bunch of, they were learning a lot. I mean, we're still learning a lot, but
birth defects were very, very common, caused by pharmaceuticals and by Agent Oranges and like that. Yeah. That was later on though, but I don't think that was earlier than.
Okay, so they have well, I mean, we had asbestos that we didn't know was a thing, and
right. Yeah.
The mold thing. Okay, so this is where it gets into vegetarianism or fruitarianism. Really.
Fruitarianism.
Yeah. Exactly. So she's like, he basically tells her that we're shortening our lives at least by half, and that we should be able to live to 200, and on fruit and seeds that are man's foods. and that like the green herbs are to be food for the animals, and that but we are poison, and he doesn't expect anyone who's poisoned to have rational thoughts.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
she's just like, what? No. Like,
Yeah, she was getting angry there, and then afterwards she reflected on that and was like, oh yeah, maybe the doctors today that everyone thinks are so great are actually poisoned as well, so they don't have rational thoughts either. So I liked how that she related that later on. But yeah, she was not having rational thoughts in that moment. Although he did give her some credit, like you're still pretty good,
like
even
yeah,
though
for
for
being
someone who's
poisoned.
poisoned.
All right. Which I thought this was an interesting thing. So because he's just saying that everybody should be a fruitarian, and she goes, but surely, I argued, if we all lived off the trees, there would be even more food storage than there is now. And he's like, no, on the contrary, declared Raphael, fruit and nuts are so sustaining, so purifying, both mentally and physically, that many things would happen. People would lose all their unnatural appetites. Their new diets would prove to be so satisfying that they would eat far, far less. As more and more trees were planted, rainfall and climate would improve, deserts would disappear, animal life left to itself would adjust itself, animals no longer preyed upon by men would cease to be dangerous, even cease to prey upon each other. From trees and shrubs, man can obtain all his needs: wood for building, cotton, paper, cork, rubber, medicine, clothing, all the food he requires. Thus, living thus, man would lose his stupidity, cruelty, and acquirativeness. War and disease would cease forever. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, that's like that's a lot, and everything gets back in balance. Basically, if we were to follow that, and she goes and checks that out in the Bible later on.
Yeah, and I guess it does kind of corroborate with what she read. But for me, it's more of, which I really related to some part in her. I didn't really take notes whenever she went mundane. When she goes into her mundane world, I just would scan. But one of the times she's like eating dinner with her cousin, who's just gives her a hard time about not eating meat all the time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And she is starting to just, after she's had these conversations, she's having like a real hard time like eating meat. And her aunt is even like, oh, but God gave us the animals. And it is interesting because I've been a vegetarian since or for like 8 years, so since 2011. So like I definitely have had people say that kind of thing to me. Like I was at a wedding recently, and these people were just like, what, you're not eating the steak? It's like, it's good steak. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, I don't eat meat, you know. And it was just like, what's wrong with you? God gave us the animals. And you're just like, serenity now. Like,
yeah.
But it is interesting because for me, more than anything, there is like a karmic, like I understood her plight, how she's like thinking about, she's eating the animal, she's like going like, oh, like what, like she's thinking about. That's my whole thing, is like, I just don't want to think about, you know, like
Everything that's involved.
I don't want to think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to have blood on your hands, so then you're able to not do it by being a vegetarian. You have a cleaner consciousness, a cleaner conscience by just doing
well,
what
at least about that particular element in life, I do. Maybe not on everything, but yeah, for that.
Well, sure. No, exactly. Yeah, she was having a struggle with it for a long time because, of course, her cousin was the one who was in charge of cooking and kept trying to make these things, and she would go back and forth on it. But eventually, it seems like that was it. She gave in and she became a vegetarian, or not a fruitarian, yeah, just a vegetarian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she even says like she says Hitler's a vegetarian. Did you read that?
Yes. Yeah, he said, like, well, it's oh, right. Yeah. And then he says, yeah.
On page 132.
That's not the complete story. For instance, we know, because yes, she wanted to know
if that's just the answer. Is it just you become fruitarian? And he's like, well, not just that.
Right. Is fruitarian pretty much the answer to everything? He said, no, that's not the complete story, because Hitler was a vegetarian, or is a vegetarian at that time. And it says, no, the first requirement for mankind to get a reaction from its present mode of living, and to decide at last to try to be really honest spiritually. So yeah, to decide at last to try to be really honest spiritually. So that means facing things like thou shalt not kill. And
Yeah.
it was like that was only part of it, because you really had to do a lot of self-reflection. That was the real, that to me was the deeper story of what needed to be done.
And it says, yeah, and then again, so no meat, no furs, no leathers, no animal serums. Then again, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. That means that no exploitation of animals, plants, soil, water, and one's fellow man. So no profiteering, no usury, no slums, or even perhaps no minors. So it was talking about that would be more of the complete story of like what would purify your mind, so that to purify us from being poisoned, because we're currently poisoned. And so she just cannot get over that he's 200 plus years old, or that anybody could be. She's just like, that's not our reality. And I mean, he even tells her about like, oh no, well, there's like like there's plenty of evidence of it throughout time, and we just choose to ignore that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then in the end, she died in her 90s, just so everyone knows. Just out of, I don't know what she changed in her lifestyle, but it's interesting to see.
Well, her Wikipedia page says she did become a vegetarian in her later life. It was a pretty big advocate of it after this.
Oh, in her later life.
Or well, I think this is probably written when she's in her 30s.
Yeah, at least in her 30s.
So I think she
kind of like, oh, she's a spinster here. She was going to get married. Her fiance died 8 years earlier.
Mm-hmm. And then she like doesn't ever talk. I don't think she ever had kids. Never talks about anything like that. So, no. I was looking up some of her paintings. She's pretty good.
Yeah.
She was an artist.
Yeah, she was an artist.
Okay.
What's the point of all this with my art? And I was selling it for money, and then in the end she was like, what, why? But why? What was the point of all that? Or like now, but you know, you could look to your past and say, oh, well, why did I do that? Or you're in a different place in your life now.
Yeah, for sure. All roads lead you to where you are. So she goes into, then he's kind of like, okay, well, like, all right, enough about the vegetarian or the fruitarian thing. He's kind of just like, you're poisoned. I'm not talking to you about this anymore. You don't understand. But he's like, so what are your feelings on reincarnation? Like, do you believe it and stuff? And she's like, well, I've written about it, but I mean, I believe it from a like
theoretical
academic,
point of view,
theoretical point of view, but I don't know about it practically. And then so then he talks to her about like how like humans are learning to become gods, and that we become stars, and that the stars are gods basically. And she's like, what?
I loved that. I totally love that.
I did too. And something about how the stars go on somewhere else, and so like openings.
Yeah, they have openings, right?
Yeah, so somebody has to fill them.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. I wonder if that's similar to like a what is that called? A fill-in, or like a stand-in, or when a soul comes in and takes over an entity. I wonder if that's the same thing that happens.
Yeah, it says, look how they twinkle. Do I have to remind you that they are all alive, and that they are all the physical bodies of heavenly beings? Those beings are progressing just as we are. From time to time, one of them meticulates. I don't know what that means. Meticulates, as it were, and has to move on to more advanced work. Their place then becomes vacant, and it must be filled by younger deities. So where do you think those come from?
Right.
And I'm just kind of going like, yeah, well, but that's where I was kind of going, but yeah, but why would they come from a human, or even an enlightened human? Like, wouldn't they come from like an enlightened planet that would then be like if we got Earth enlightened or advanced, then she could go off and become her own star instead of the sun.
But at the same time, if we're not just human, so you would be experiencing what it would be like to be a star.
I guess I would think like if there was a hierarchy, or as they talk about hierarchies, I would think that like our next, you know how like the cell, when she goes into the foot of the doctor, she talked about how like the cell's greatest aspiration was to be the mind cell the next time of like this doctor, basically.
Right.
And then if we are the mind cells of, or maybe a mind cell's greatest aspiration would be to be its own human. And maybe the human's aspiration would be to be its own planet. And the planet's aspiration would be to be its own star. Like, I would think it would go
Right.
like,
Oh, so I don't think it, oh, you think maybe it has to have this order. I don't
yeah,
know.
maybe, I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah. Or maybe it does. Maybe it does what, yeah, he didn't say that it had to be a direct,
Star.
he didn't say anything that you would all of a sudden be reincarnated as a star, but he just implied that there was no, that you could be it, like that's something that you would evolve to or ascend
Right.
to. So yeah, we don't know what the order is.
We don't know what the order is. But then, so he goes into, what's psychometry. He says
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
yeah, how do you say that?
I would
Psychometry.
say psychometry, yeah.
And it was like it's basically the reading of Akashic records. So
Yeah, that was cool. Though I loved also the part about the Akashic records, because that was just constantly talked about for the last few chapters with the dream state, when they went into the dream world and what that looked like, but how the Akashic records are your everything taking place, your own personal record, everything taking place. It is photographic and records, pictures of everything taking place, and all sounds made. Yeah, it's impossible for us in physical bodies to imagine. So some people consider it like a big library. It doesn't say that there, but that's what I was just interpreting what that was. And there's a part of everyone's personality which is linked to the Akashic records, appertaining to himself. And I'll give you a glimpse of yours. So takes her into the hall of records. Pretty cool.
Right. Now this part, and I kind of paraphrased what her things were, but so she was like, the lives she got to see was she got to be a cave woman, and she would draw like these triangles and circles and then get beaten by her caveman. And then she was an Egyptian priest, and that caveman who beat her was one of her pupils. And then she was in a debauchery scene with her dad and her sister. And then the next life she was a leper and shunned by her dad and her sister, which was like a lesson that she had to learn from this debauchery. And then even further on down the line, that she was a duchess, and her duke was her dead fiance from her current life that had and she had a wandering eye for this blue-eyed guy who I took as, who was the cave beater and the Egyptian pupil, who I took as Raphael. Was that Raphael?
That's what I thought. I don't know. I was wondering the same thing. He didn't say that was him, but I thought that was him too, because she said, "What, am I in love with two men at the same time?"
Well, and also she talks about Raphael's like stark blue eyes at one point too. So you're kind of going like, okay, well maybe that's him.
That was what I thought too. Yeah.
And then she's like, well, which one's my true love? And he's like, he says that, well, would you be opposed for me telling you that there isn't one true love, but the love of your group,
your group, your soul group.
Not your individual. So that's the other thing talks about, like we come as there's
whole family.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and it was her fiance who was when she was the Duchess, he was in love with her. It was her husband at the time. He was in love with her, and that she didn't really care at that point that he loved her.
Yeah, she went off with the other one, and she got to be punished for that.
Right. Well, she was like literally killed. She was actually killed for that. And then
no, but like in this incarnation, that's why her incarnation,
was her fiance now, and he died 8 years earlier.
Yeah, early.
And the reason why he died was because she finally fell in love with him in this life, and pretty much it was because she didn't treat him very well, or wasn't in love with him in the past one. Yeah. And I also liked this bowl gazing thing. So when they went into the Akashic records, he's like, let's go over to this glass bowl of water and then start looking at it. And so you can concentrate your gaze until you begin to look inwards to see your own self. So that's the point. And you always think of like these gypsies or whoever
with the crystal balls,
crystal ball, but
which, by the way, I've looked on. Those are expensive if you want to get a real crystal ball, like an actual.
But he was just using water.
Water in a bowl, yeah.
In a bowl, a crystal bowl or water. That's cool. Yeah. So it's
Kind of
just
like the, it's kind of like the
basic.
candle, you know, like when you
Right.
meditate on a candle flame or whatever, I kind of think
Yes.
it's supposed to be like,
It brings your brain into a different state.
yeah,
Well, that
I
there,
wonder why it would be better than our, well, maybe it's just different, not better, than just having your eyes closed.
I think because it actually, like, looking into it, you're, first of all, well, I
Like
guess your eyes are
daydreaming.
open. Yeah. And it's like your eyes are open, but you're just kind of like, ooh, like in a trance. You get into a trance.
Mm. Yeah, and then
Oh, I wanted to say mention about the triangles within the other triangle. So
yeah,
she
in a
drew
circle.
when she was a cave woman. She was doodling a triangle within another triangle, like superimposed upon it, and then a circle within the two. And I thought it was interesting that she was drawing that because, again, kind of like, oh, is this sacred geometry? What was that? And that this symbol she kept seeing or drawing through her lives, and that would help remind her of something. It would, like, bring her back to, yeah, like, I've seen that, like, I know that from somewhere. And I think we've all had that experience, like, that seems familiar, but I don't know
Mm.
why. So that was like, oh, her line back to who she really is.
Yeah, and he says like the soul is without sex or age, and it incarnates with groups of fellow souls with whom they have a variety of experiences and relationships. So then he says to her, it's taken you personally several millions of years to want to know why you're here on earth.
Yes, right, just wanting to know why you're here is like, oh, finally, like he was
Oh,
waiting around for her.
the baby wants to know.
All
Yeah, you know, it feels like that.
right. As soon as people start wanting to know is when then they'll start getting teachers. Like, when the student is ready, the teacher will come, type of thing.
Right, right.
And it takes like these thousands of years for it to happen. And she's like, well, I'm not gonna forget, or everything that he
He's like,
taught her
yeah,
at
you're
some
gonna
point.
forget.
You're gonna forget. You're gonna forget, and then you'll remember. And it goes back to us having that conversation, like, oh, why do I have to forget? But I think
Can
that
we
all of
not
this is
forget?
helping us to remember a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. And then okay, so then their relationship, he takes her to the French Revolution, and that's the last one she gets to see. That was the last one. She was a dude. That was the last one before she was currently incarnated. And she's there in this group with a bunch of people awaiting the guillotine or whatever. They're gonna be uh beheaded, and Raphael is supposed to be killed, and she argues with him. Even though she's a dude, she's like, hey, let me take your place. I've got tuberculosis anyway. I'm gonna die anyway, and you're like a super awesome teacher. And I guess he's some kind of spiritual teacher or something at that point who she was following. And she's like, if we just switch coats, like, they won't notice, and I'll take your place at the guillotine. And he lets her. She does it, and boom goes the dynamite. Like, that's why he decided to come back to her for her in this incarnation, because he owed her um
Yeah. And
knowledge,
he said,
basically.
you have no idea how much that affected me. So that action was very important for him, not just for him to come back to her, for her as a teacher,
No, but
as a
yes, for him
student.
as a being too,
Yeah,
because
it was
he,
him,
and then
his
she's
soul
like, well,
growth.
yeah, how come you look the same as that incarnation? That was over
Yeah.
200 years ago. Like, what the heck, you know? And she's like, are you over 200 years old? And he never really answers her one way or the other. And then she's like, are you something different? Are you like, are
Yeah,
you
like, who
part of
are
the,
you? Like, what are
yeah,
you?
who are you? What are you? And then he basically tells her, like, she's like, are you part of this hierarchy, meaning like an angel or a cherub or a seraphim or something like that? And he's like, well, what do you know about this hierarchy? And she's just like, yeah, I don't know, like saints or something, or people who get halos and go. I mean, he's like, yeah, okay, your churches know nothing. Like, it's pointless for me to basically explain the hierarchy, but like, yeah, basically I'm in the hierarchy, whatever that means. And then he kind of talks about how they're um um
Yeah, I want
hierarchy
to
is
see
the
the hierarchy.
spiritual government of solar systems, and they govern for real by teaching and through cooperation. So it's
Okay.
kind of like, it almost kind of feels like a galactic federation or something.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. There's like this the hierarchy spiritual government of the solar system and the planet. They do not float about playing harps. They govern. And very hard work it is too. But theirs is not an autocracy. They govern in a very real way through teaching and cooperation, and their ranks are stepped down from the highest beings of whom we cannot even conceive to the humblest saints on earth, who are qualifying sometimes more rapidly than their fellows for promotion upon the path. That to me is like, okay. I mean, you can interpret it any way you want, but it's just like, wow, what?
Yeah, I mean, is it like he's an angel now, or some kind
Right.
of form of one, or I'm not sure, but he's still young. And she's like, you're still youngish looking. Like I don't know what that means to her. Like
Right.
he's
Like a
40,
middle-aged man,
middle-aged
maybe.
man or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. Like obviously he doesn't look like a 200-year-old.
Right. That we would think.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what a 200-year-old would look like, because
Yeah, I know. I mean, it just looks
yeah,
like dirt or walking skeleton, essentially, is what you would think, right? If we went by our current standards, because
if we went
100-year-olds
by our
look like,
standards, exactly.
yeah, they look like crocodiles. So, I mean,
Right. But that's not, yeah. If you're that advanced, you can stay in the
yeah,
forever young state. Yes. Yeah, that whole hierarchy thing is pretty cool. He talks a little bit about karma. Karma is the result of past action or thought. It's often arranged by the soul in order to develop character. I think people pretty much know about karma, but it is
yeah.
mentioned.
But and I did think that she's like, well, I know what I think of karma, but what's your definition of karma? And he tells her that um karma is the result of past action or past thoughts and actions, and all relationship follies have to be resolved into impersonal love. So he's like basically tells her um like all these relationships with you have, they like evoke emotions of like whatever, like envy or jealousy or like possessiveness, or I can't remember
Yes,
some of the other.
you have
He's
to
like
experience it all.
you have to experience all of that, and then you have to then be able to like look at all those relationships and have an impersonal love for all of them,
Right.
which makes sense, but it's interesting.
Yeah, makes sense, but it's
Hard,
obviously
difficult.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's good work though. Good self work.
Good self stuff. Yeah. Let's see, what else did I want to say about that. Oh yeah, and he won't teach her like the secrets of longevity, besides telling her to be a fruitarian, until she has to burn some of her karma and get rid of some of her destiny.
Yes. Yeah, she's still going to meet people on this path in this life.
Yeah, because
that
she's
she
not.
has
He's like, you're still not
challenges.
done.
Yeah. Right.
She's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like,
You have a lot to learn before you can get to that. He goes, once you've cleaned that up, then many moons from now, when you're ready, when you've learned that and you've gotten past that, then
then
I'll
maybe
be back.
we can yeah go further with it, but
Yeah. Well, that's when he says he'll be back to her.
yeah, and he teaches her how to basically contact him, because she's like super like not okay with him. This is like one of their last meetings, and he tells her so. And yeah, so she's like not so cool with that. And then so he's just kind of like, well, you could basically contact me via meditation. And
Right.
he has her do this exercise where he has her conjure up, like in her brain, like conjure up the image of her rabbit bin that she's like really likes. And so she kind of like daydreams up the rabbit and like forms it within her inner eye, and it even moves, and she kind of gets a little bit shaken by that. And then that kind of creates this thing where he's like, well, yeah, that right there is your brain is the receiver. It's like, it's basically a wireless set that can, you can get messages from me through that. So you have to train your brain to do that through meditation.
Right. Through meditation. You have to do it yourself. Everything that you have to do, you have to do yourself for contacting me or for getting like past yourself. All the answers are within yourself, basically.
Right.
When you start asking questions and you have the answers to your own questions is when.
Oh, right. That's true. He did say that that's when like when you don't need me to answer your questions, when you can answer your own questions, like that's when it's like on, like Donkey Kong.
Right. Yeah. On like Donkey Kong.
Which is exactly worded in this 19. No. Okay, so then
It starts getting complicated.
This gets complicated. Yeah. Okay. The last like 25 pages are like, okay. But so she starts, so she feels, he's basically telling her, you know, she's going to have to do some work, right? So then first thing she does is she creates this flyer where she tries to get people like like-minded individuals who want to work on she's trying to get a club together about kind of like these teachings. I that's what I'd call it, right? With her little flyer thing that she's trying to do.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, she was just putting the word out there. I wasn't sure. I guess a club. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I would just call it kind of like I looked it up that she ended up running some society, like a wisdom teaching society.
Yes, yes.
And she was friends with Alice Bailey, who was a really famous psychic. So she obviously did some good connections later on in her life, because and I contacted the trust that this publication is under to see if I could do the audiobook, which I don't know if I'll do that or not, because I'm a horrible, like, I'm not the strongest of reader out louders. Whatever you call that. Like, it would take me a year to be like, okay, let me re-record that. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, like they have a bunch of weird. I think they basically have all the publication rights to that little group that she belonged to.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would be interesting to hear. That they have recordings of that? Is that what you said?
No, a lot of them are writers. A lot of them are like these famous psychic spiritual writers. So in England, so
and he said Raphael said to her, the people that you meet through the flyer that you made, like be aware of them. Like you're gonna be wise to it. Be wise to them.
Right. And like she was supposed to meet this one particular dude. And he's like, I hope you're smart on that day. Or I hope you're,
Right. I hope you're wise on that day.
Yeah.
When you meet her. So he mentions that about the work that she did. He liked that thing that she wrote up. She wrote up the flyer.
So then this is where I kind of go like a little bit like, wait, okay. So then they basically talk. So he's gonna follow around a dream straight, right? So like this, one of the last things he does there is he takes her into somebody else's dream. So like they see this middle-aged kind of hot dude. I don't know what the point of that, a fine-looking man who she didn't even seem to know, and they follow him into the astral plane, and she even sees her cousin up there and is sleeping, who's being taught by like a dead sister or something. And it seems like a bunch of people in their dream state go for learning, which I resonate with.
Exactly. I think that's what it's there for.
I think stuff happens. I mean, a lot of times we forget, but there's some work going on.
He mentioned that too. We don't really forget, because I forgot exactly what it was, but you integrate it, like everything that you've learned, even though you consciously forget it, you haven't really forgotten it. It's inside. It's integrated into you.
Right. Well. Okay, so
he goes to that guy.
So they follow this man in his astral body, and apparently he's a friend of Raphael's, so that he's allowing them to follow them in their dreams. And they go to, I would call it a council meeting. What would you call it?
Oh, yeah. I didn't think it was really. Oh, maybe I guess a meeting. He looked also inside the crystal ball, so that she was.
Yeah, but they were also in a room where she saw like Hitler and talking to Roosevelt, and she saw like Da Vinci and some.
And basically, he's like, "That's not for us to look at."
And he's like, she's like, "Wait, what's that?" Like, no. Like, yeah, that's there, but that's not. Yeah, come bring it back. And so like he called these were the masters of wisdom.
Yeah, that's what he called wisdom. That's right.
And he also mentioned her into passing, and she was like, "What does that even mean?" And he's like, "Oh, like basically, there's people who go and teach people who haven't perfected the science and of meditation and mastered it."
Yes, I like that. And the masters of wisdom, those who have achieved on the path of which I spoke to you, and who have acquired comparative perfection after many incarnations. Some of the former lives would be familiar to you, such as Leonardo da Vinci, Swedenborg, and Pythagoras.
And then thought form of meditation that you can use as a telephone. I thought that was interesting. So he's basically saying that, like, if you get good enough at meditation, it becomes like telepathy, essentially. Like there's a telepathic connection that can be had with him and her at all times, whenever she needs anything.
Right.
And then I liked this. He said, she was like, let me ask you about the moon. And I was like, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Before we go into the moon thing, could we go back to their meeting? So she mentions earlier about this whole human family is one body, right? So that we're one body whose prime need is for an adequate headpiece. And the headpiece should constitute a sort of world government or council formed of pioneer experts in every branch of living. A world government, I repeated. And then he said, oh, well, what did you think about that? What do you think about that? And she's like, yeah, I like this. It kind of reminded me of this whole singularity thing that's people are talking about.
The oneness and all that.
And the oneness, and also the one world order, which I don't know, because there's
that always seems negative though. Like the one that's why I'm kind of going like, wait. I thought we're supposed to hate one world governments. Like that's why I was kind of a little bit going like, wait a minute. Okay. So yeah.
I know. I feel like maybe it's been robbed. I feel like the nice intention.
Yeah, maybe because he even when you so real quick though. Okay, so basically they see this, and then afterwards, her very, very last meeting with Raphael, she goes into his vision, like what he sees for the vision of the future, and he does see a one world government, and he sees like I actually kind of liked a lot of his vision. But he talks about how
he doesn't. Sorry, he calls it a world organism rather than a world government.
I like that too.
Yeah,
and he also says that they have government, but they don't have government within their communities too.
Right.
I really liked his whole little thing. Like, so his vision was like instead of like. They went over like England in a plane, basically. It was like a noiseless plane, which I thought was like really, really cool. And instead of patchwork, you saw patchworks of forests instead of patchworks of fields. And the roads were like lined with edible fruit. And there was no property lines. And it was everything was made of geometrical shapes. And she's like, well, how can this even happen? He's like, well, you have to break the world's money complex. That you guys are all slaves to, and that the plane that he was flying in was an atomic plane that seemed really awesome, and that it was basically
future technology.
Yeah, basically atomic energy that's noiseless, fumeless, and very economical, and it's drawn from the air itself and stored and released by means of manipulation of vibrations of colored rays. People can even manufacture it for themselves. So I'm like, wow, well, if that ever existed, sign me up.
Yes. Well, earlier, it didn't occur to me as much until you just read it now, but the vibration point, that was mentioned earlier, one of the earliest chapters about how pretty much vibration is like the vibration and intention is like the building blocks. I mean, it doesn't say that, that's my interpretation, but it mentions how important vibration was. So here it comes again in his vision.
Which we've kind of been very interested in that.
Yeah. Well, and it's coming around a lot. It's coming up a lot right now. I like the way the houses were made of a kind of glass, and then I was thinking, was it solar? But then again, that was atomic energy.
Yeah, but it seemed very non-invasive, essentially.
Yes, everything was non-invasive, of course, and the houses were made. That's right. They were the colors of sunshine, of water, of green. And they looked like they were built on dragonflies' wings. So it was fit in with the environment.
Oh, let's go back real quick to the meditation thing of the she said like thought forms of meditation that you can use as a telephone. Yeah. But then she said make use of the full moon period. Oh, because it's like it's when the veils are the thinnest, and it's where you can connect with your higher mind. And then,
I loved that.
And then with the meditation, he says, I quoted this when he said, they learned to quiet their whole personality so that they can become aware of the subtler side of life. That is meditation. Until you are able to obtain your own answers to any question. And then heaven is the mind of God, or a reflection of it. Wake your mind up to do much creative and valuable work. So that was my notes on that, which I thought that was because she was asking like, well, how are we ever going to attain this like la la land of beauty that you have in your vision, your future vision?
Yeah.
Well, he basically says that in the future, that when everything's reforested or whatever, the climatize changes. There's no seasons because there's no deserts or whatever, like balances the planet, and the animals stop eating each other and everything kind of like stops reproducing as much. And it's all kind of, it goes back to that same, in the alien interview, how they basically made animals eat each other so that they could get more money to produce, or remember that was like the Bugs and the Blossoms, the company was they made
oh right, so then it was self-sustaining, and then they didn't have to
yeah, well that was what reproduction was for, but they were talking about like the reason that they wanted the animals to eat each other was so that it wouldn't get overpopulated.
Right. Yeah, but that was like the opposite, because it's just gonna, if no animal,
it's almost like this is reversing that like Monsanto thing.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, maybe that was like, I don't know, I'm just comparing the two, like thinking it's the domain or the old empire.
I know, they're both like, we're like both getting super into these like fictional stories, being like, ooh. And then what if this part was yeah, exactly. But then it kind of, the very lesson, it kind of goes into like the second coming of Christ and how there's going to be one religion and one government. And I'm like, okay.
Well, I thought that, the second coming of Christ has to do, a lot of people say it's not like a physical Christ.
Well, it's not like Jesus, like that. That's another thing.
It's Christ consciousness. It's what people call the Christ consciousness. It's too bad that it's got such a stigma. But yeah, so it's just this whole like mass consciousness, really, and this love. Okay, so like explain that to me, because like I think I'm part of one of the people who has a stigma against it, because I always see it so dogmatic, like that's super, whatever, like something that my religious uncle would say to me, right, and it wouldn't actually make any sense to me. So it's like the Christ consciousness is. Well, the Christ what is the Christ consciousness? I can't say that I would be able to like interpret it well, I don't know, according to like details, but my thoughts about it is that that what did Christ really teach? What are Christ's real teachings? Half of them most of them we probably don't even know, because they're not even, we don't have interpreted down to us correctly, right? But essentially it would be we actually don't have his teachings. We don't actually have his words. True. Because they're hidden in the Vatican or wherever they are. But anyway, basically it's like peace and love, like love your neighbor, love yourself, don't kill, blah, blah, blah. And like you are a creator. And you're a creator. Everything that I could do, you can do more and more so. And the kingdom of heaven is on earth. So everything, what he said, not the person. And I don't think that he would want to be like, worship me, the person. He'd be like, let's just do these ideas. So that's the consciousness of it, and that's what I think the second coming is. And the second coming is, personally, I actually think that we're in the midst of the second coming, because if there was actually another Messiah or Christ, people would just put him to death again. I mean, it's not like it's going to be somebody's like, oh, all right, Jesus got here. Well, and I also think like we can probably conclusively say that the one head of the snake is not working for us. Yeah, no. Yeah, I think that the whole one religion thing and the one government thing, or the one council, whatever they call it, is just the singularity is what that's what we're like, we're all one, and like don't like kill each other. We're all one, and we're not even like everyone. I guess that's, well, I mean, I almost feel like something like, if you like, because honestly, a lot of how Raphael describes what he sees the future being, I've had visions of that too. I told you I had like that enlave where that thing was like, all right, I had this voice come over me that was like, you're of the builder race, build it better. I was like, what? And I started taking down all like the light fixtures and the roads and bringing everything back to its right. Yeah, and then like building all these forests and stuff up and giving everybody like these memory circles and all this crap. I think we talked about that in a past podcast, or whatever. But for me,
and I write a lot of stuff about like how I think government should work or how communities and systems should work and stuff. I think about this kind of stuff a lot, and it's kind of similar to this. I almost think like something that would really wake everybody up would be a kind of understanding that the planet itself is intelligent and knowing our part in it, and knowing that we're living on a being instead of like my older brother who thinks this is just a dead floating rock. He doesn't see the connection of other things are alive. Like I think a lot of people are poisoned to the point where they don't. That's the thing. What I think a lot of people are missing is that no. We really are part of a symbiotic system. That we're just one living thing amongst millions of trillions of living things. Like everything is alive. Everything is consciousness in its own self. And knowing that, I think, would help people a lot.
Right. Yeah.
So it's got to be some sort of wave that there's got to be some sort of event or action that happens from the being that is the earth or something that lets us, or I don't know how that would manifest itself, but whether it's a natural disaster or if it's like some sort of like just, I mean, like let's say miraculous healings are a thing. Like let's say like there's people who have convinced themselves to, like a lot of people talk about the spontaneous miraculous healings of their bodies or whatever. That's got to be some way in which a person was able to communicate with their cells and everything and just like manifest themselves better. Maybe the earth could figure out how to manifest herself better, and then all of a sudden we're like, us as the little brain cells go like, oh wait, she's a lot, we live on a living being. Okay, let's be nice to the living being that we live on. That'd be cool.
Well, when I think of the future and creating this similar future, because I've also had this thought of it's almost like a utopia, which also has a stigma word kind of, but okay, let's say a better future that was fair and just and
whatever. I don't care. I want to live on a utopia.
Yeah. Okay. So we live in a utopia, but anyway, so my picturing about it was that, or the ascension, that we're all ascending into this new way of being and living and thinking and interacting, communicating with each other and Earth. My thought was, when I meditate, I also think of Mother Earth as another conscious being, so that when I think of her, like, okay, we're rising together. You are another person, Mother Earth, than you were before. You are coming out of your own shackles and you're ascending with your own consciousness. So as she ascends and becomes more conscious, so do we, and as we do, so do we. So does she. There's no separation in that. It's just like we're both conscious beings, or we're all conscious beings. So that's it. There's no like, what we do affects her, what she does affects us. It's just intertwined like that.
Yeah, well, we definitely know that the oil and stuff like that is like her blood, and we just like drain her blood. I think that's just, yeah.
But and also like, if people are able to heal themselves, or what's happening when it happens, then we have to think about the quantum field again. What's happening?
The energetic things, like what's
energetic things. What's
etheric.
happening? Yeah.
I don't know.
It was a positive thing. I think we are still going in that direction. Hopefully.
I hope so, but I also did sort of feel like, but like you guys didn't. At this point, you guys didn't know about plastic, or there was a lot of things that have happened since this book was written, and since she died in 1979, so she missed out on a lot of the negatives that have kind of like come about, which is fine. I still think we can. I mean, what has happened in the last 40 years since then, or whatever, is that we have grown as a collective consciousness in terms of the internet. The internet has connected us as our Tower of Babel. We are able to get all the world's information at one fingertip. It's like that's like super good, but it's only good if you use it in a good way.
Well, true. But I feel that if we get worried about what's happening and look at all these things like the bad things, then we it's almost
It's
like,
not productive either.
well, that's true, but I feel that, okay, so Hitler in this space was having a conversation with Churchill in this dream state, where, right?
Roosevelt.
And oh, was it Roosevelt?
Yeah.
And so I thought that it was Churchill, whatever. Anyway, big dogs over there having this conversation, and he said, "You don't know what it's too much for you to know right now." Because you don't really know the larger implication. I'm not saying that I want anything bad to happen to anybody, but we don't know on a spiritual galactic level what those types of events have and what they're catalysts for us to change.
Yeah, and he basically told her as much as like these wars are
you have to experience them in order to move away from them. You have to be sad in order to experience happy, vice versa. It's the whole experience, and it's so hard for us to accept that because and we don't want that. But once we can get past that, or it's all part of the experience. It's such a horrible thing to say because it's like, well, people are put into concentration camps and they're still suffering every day, and we all have these issues in our lives. And what is the point of all this? It seems so reckless. But we look at like time spans and these short little linear time spans that we don't really know what's happening at other levels and other dimensions, or the longer term implications of them. Like
yeah,
there's
for sure.
positive that can come out of everything. The first thing I thought of, honestly, when I heard 9/11 was something good is going to happen from this. And I mean, yeah, there's been tons of good things that have happened from it, or because of it, but they wouldn't have happened if it didn't happen. I'm not saying I wouldn't want to change it, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, I guess. But I think that, like, if we look at all the plastic problem, that was your initial thought with plastic and where we're at. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to have suffering. I don't want to be poisoned either. And, but at the same time, it's like, if that never happened, then I don't know. Would we even be conscious of making?
Would we even know like how vulnerable the ecosystems are? I don't know.
Or would we even want to care? Would we even question? He said to her, "You are, wow, finally you're questioning why you're here." So would we even have gotten to those points? If those things never happened, would we even be asking? We would just be continuing to live in the dark. I often think like, okay, Jesus, all right, people. I'm like, Jesus. Everyone's like, oh, Jesus, people that are like Jesus lovers. Jesus did all this great thing. And I'm like, Jesus, people died in his name. Like there were wars fought and like these horrible things that came out. Like maybe
Native Americans are all gone because of him.
Right? Because of like, but like all, yeah,
in
but
his
Christianity
name,
and one thing after another in the name of religion. And then I think, well, okay, so would it have been better if he never came? And then it's like, well, maybe, but at the same time, if he was the one that was really showing this consciousness of this, you can do this too, then that was the real reason. Then that was like planting the seed of the consciousness for the rest of us. And here we are over 2,000 years later, and we're still killing in his name, and there's still lots of problems, but the consciousness.
Yeah, but I also feel like if he wouldn't have come, it would have been some other thing to fixate on, because it's like there's so many different religions in the world, like there, and Christianity is just one of many where I almost feel like innately we are followers. We need something to look up to, and I wonder what that is about us. That I caught myself like when he was saying, and I was reading today. I was outside reading, and when he was saying that, yeah, you have to until you are able to obtain your own answers to any question. Like that was like when you've basically made it. And then I was kind of thinking to myself, even I always am kind of like would love for my higher self to help me out with things, or would love for clarity on things, or would love, because it's just like I mean, I humbly don't know everything, obviously. And
I want to see the person that says they do.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know how we get to looking for answers outside of ourselves, or how, I don't know how we get to where we stop looking for answers outside of ourselves. This was where.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Where you get to a point where you're just okay with answering your own questions, and that you firmly are okay with that. Like you believe it.
Yeah, you're like,
I don't need to ask something else because I found this. Ooh, that's, I don't know, maybe in a certain sequence of evolution of events. I don't know. But that again goes back to, okay, I know there's other religions, but I'm most familiar with Christianity. So if you go back to Jesus, and he was like, you could do this yourself, right? So before, and even now, the religions, the dogmatic religions are all about like finding, you have to go to this outside of yourself because they need you to go to their services, or they need you to whatever, to pay them, whatever the reason is, whatever, you need to go to this church. But the truth is, he was just like, you don't need to do that. You just need to look within. So if he was the one that was always saying that, then that's the consciousness is, you don't have to look outside yourself. You'll find everything within. But yeah, it takes discipline with meditation, or it takes discipline in practice, and having all of these experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in order to get to the point where you're like, okay. And we also want to get through all of these like negative things so quickly. It's like, we don't want to live in this horrible world, and we don't. But at the same time, like, we're in it, and should we not experience it also? You know, like, we're so quickly, I know we all are like, I don't want to feel suffering, so I want to get out of it. But at the same time, it's like, it's the experience. It's not going to last forever. And it's easy for me to say that because I'm not having that horrible pain or experience right now, but it's part of the experience.
When we're kind of like forced down our throat that we should always look outside of ourselves, it's hard to look within, but that's what you really have to do.
Yeah, because we're so programmed to just give up our power and our own our own godliness, you know, because we have to. Other people have the answers. Who are you to think that? Who are you to be a god, or who are you to have the answers to that? And then we just belittle ourselves in order to not shine bright, you know?
And it is like Steve Jobs said, he was like, everything you can look at, or you can think of, or you can that you've ever experienced in life was created by a person no different than you. Like, you know, this pen, this book, this microphone, this phone, everything was created by like other Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Like you.
No, I do want to read one of the final walkaways that Raphael says. So he says, always keep hold, Verity, of the main vision I have given you. Every time you suffer and fall by the wayside, pick yourself up. Recollect who and what you really are, and go on with your destined work with renewed vigor and vision. Remember always that you are on the way to second birth, that escape out of the womb of ignorance and materialism into the freedom of godhood on earth. So that was his vision for what life could be like on earth, and just giving her you can do it. Even when you fall, just get back up.
And he does stress that, like, it's not going to be easy for you going forward.
Right.
Right.
There's a lot of tests to learn. So we all have them, but we have to keep going forward. Oh, and one other point I do want to mention is the meditations. He was also saying that was going to happen, like a government meditations, where they're going to be having people do them kind of like on a larger scale. Did you? Yeah,
I didn't catch that.
I've seen will be so when she saw what he was gazing at, they were gazing together. What you have seen will be a world event taking place regularly everywhere. It will be the greatest thing in people's lives. In each country, initiates will hold regular meditation meetings to amplify and study the new teaching.
Okay.
So I think the new teaching was like this new age, this new vision, and also the meditation itself, right? And how we're all connected. That was my thought. So
okay. Yeah. So maybe that's like where the collective consciousness kind of gets some activation or something.
Yes. Yeah, maybe. That is happening now with these mass.
I mean, you just have to like realize that what our current governments are and what our current like news outlets and stuff, they only have as much power as you give them. Like we can create our own thing aside from like next to them and become bigger than them.
Right.
Like
That's
companies
true.
have already done that. There's like, I would venture to say Google's bigger than the United States, you know,
Yeah.
or Apple maybe. I don't know. Like there's definitely some companies that are
Bigger than governments. Sure. We're
bigger
an
than
oligarchy.
governments. Yeah.
An oligarchy. We're definitely owned by companies. But
yeah, basically we aren't necessarily government. We're a corporation.
We're a corporation, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that was the only other point I wanted to mention. Do you have any other?
Yeah. My last takeaway is on this is like, I think y'all, this is like, this is a book that I've actually like have bought and given to people. Like, and I never do that with any books. And it's just because I just think it's got so much food for thought, and it is such a nice way of thinking about different things, whether it's true or not true or whatever. It's just like, a lot of it resonates, most of it resonates with me, and I highly recommend it. It's like awesome.
Definitely. Same here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
All right. We'll see you next time.
All right. Later. Bye.
Bye.